guys, Nike here. I am super excited today to bring you the guide for the banner Bladesworn for raids in Guild Wars 2. This is the new elite spec from End of Dragons. If you are unaware, it is called the Bladesworn. So what is the Bladesworn? The Bladesworn is a build that focuses essentially everything on its burst skill. I'm not going to get into like the role play and like what does it mean in terms of like the game world, but essentially it puts huge heavy emphasis on its burst skill, and the burst skill is the hardest hitting single skill in the game, and as you'll see, it is a very important part of our DPS, and essentially you give up quite a bit to have this amazing burst skill. And the Bladesworn is challenging to play, perhaps much more challenging than Berserker or Spellbreaker for war, or Base Warrior for that matter. And payoff, if you can execute it well, is that you have a bit more DPS than those comparable specs at the top end. But the Bladesworn is not the type of build that you're going to be able to play at every raid boss. Simply put, there's going to be certain bosses that the Bladesworn is significantly worse than the Berserker at. The Bladesworn very much requires the enemy to be stationary to achieve its DPS, and there are certain bosses that move, and there's certain bosses that and certain mechanics that require you to move and do damage on the move. And as a result, the Bladesworn will be less than optimal there. An example of a boss where Bladesworn is going to be very good would be Gorseval. Gorseval is usually tanked right in the center of his arena and never moves throughout the entire fight. That is going to be a very good boss for Bladesworn. An example of an extremely bad boss for Bladesworn will be Matthias. It's difficult in general to melee Matthias. Most times you do see people playing more ranged builds at Matthias, and as a result, Bladesworn is going to be twice as hard because not only is it melee, but Matthias moves a lot, so it's going to be extra difficult to play Bladesworn there. And then there is another consideration, and that's CC. Bladesworn does indeed have higher damage potential than Berserker. However, Bladesworn has almost no CC in its base kit, and to bring CC sacrifices an amazing amount of your damage potential. That said, there are certain places where Bladesworn does have CC, and we'll sort of get into that when we talk about traits later on. But for the most part, in raids, when bosses have break bars, although there are a few exceptions, one being Gorseval, the bosses are invulnerable. The big ones for me that stand out are Slothosaur and Samurog. Those raid bosses have break bars, and during the break bar, they're invulnerable. That makes playing Bladesworn on those bosses quite suboptimal, and you'll definitely want to play Berserker there, where you can avail yourself of the superior CC options that the Berserker has access to. So, with that said, the summary of that is Bladesworn is not for everywhere. If you're looking for one warrior build that you can play at every raid boss, it certainly isn't going to be Bladesworn. I would probably recommend Power Berserker or even Kandi Berserker if that's more your style. Bladesworn is the type of boss that will be very good on certain bosses and very bad on certain other bosses. And as a result, you're going to have to dabble in Bladesworn rather than focus on it. Lastly, you might ask, why am I doing the banner build and not discussing a pure DPS variant? The answer to that question is the pure DPS variant is only slightly more damage than the banner version, and it is still a bit less than what pure DPS builds from other professions can do. So chances are a pure DPS version of Bladesworn will be suboptimal at nearly every boss compared to other DPS options. Even bosses where Bladesworn is good, playing it as a pure DPS there with no banners, in the case that perhaps you have another warrior in your comp who's bringing banners and you're free to play DPS, the selfish Bladesworn DPS build simply will just not do enough DPS. So I did not choose to include the variant of the pure damage in the build in this video. But anyway, guys, if you're ready to get into it and you have sat through this introduction long enough, we can discuss gear. So let's do that right now. So for the Bladesworn, the gear is going to be a very familiar balance to you. It's going to be full Berserker in every slot, except 2 slots, which will be Assassin. Your back piece will be Assassin, and 1 of your rings will be Assassin. The entire rest of your gear loadout will be Berserker. So very simple, very straightforward. If you are already playing Banner Warrior, then this is the gear that you already have for your Thief rune set. Now, as far as runes go, we are going to use Superior Rune of the Thief. The 6 bonus of Superior Rune of the Thief gives us a massive amount of precision, as well as an unconditional 10% damage buff while striking a foe from the behind or the flank. What this means is you're going to want to always position yourself so you're getting to use your Thief runes. Again, as I mentioned in the introduction of the video, it can be quite challenging to always flank, and some bosses, simply put, can't be flanked. For bosses that can't be flanked, I would use Superior Rune of the Eagle. Superior Rune of the Eagle does, however, give a different amount of precision, so your gear is going to have to be tweaked a little bit. Now, there is a way to figure out what the optimal setup for Eagle gear is. I would go to the Snow Crow's website, and they have a gear optimizer where you can plug in which runes you want and which profession you're playing, and it will tell you exactly what pieces to make Assassins and what to make Berserker. But one thing that I would like to stress, the fact of the matter is, like I said in the introduction, Bladesworn is already difficult to play. What it turns out is the bosses that are easy to flank are also the bosses that Bladesworn is actually kind of playable at. The bosses where Bladesworn can't flank, it's not very good at those bosses in general anyway. So you can be fairly safe going with just Thief runes and not really worrying about an Eagle set. Anytime that you are tempted to run your Eagle set because you don't think you can flank the boss, you should probably be playing with Berserker instead. So that's enough about runes. What are we doing for weapons? We're going to use an axe, and we're going to use our pistol. A pistol is the new weapon, Bladesworn, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. But the sigils are going to be Sigil of Force and Sigil of Impact. Pretty straightforward. As far as infusions go, this loadout of gear is set up so that you use all mighty infusions in every slot. That way you don't have to mix and match. I don't really want and like to make guides where people have to mix and match infusions, so the gear is set up basically to give you 100% crit chance while buffed in a raid with all power infusion. Lastly, while we're talking about gear, I want to mention consumables and food. The gear is set up so that you have 2 options. For your utility consumable, it's going to be sharpening stones. That's pretty straightforward, pretty easy. Now for food, obviously you're going to want to try to use ascended food. One issue is the gear is balanced and the food choice you have to make is based on whether or not you have spotter. If you have a druid or a soul beast or whoever in your group that's giving you spotter, then you should use power food like corn crusted UV steaks or the bowl of sweet and spicy butternut squash soup. However, if you do not have spotter in your subgroup, you will be 100% 100 precision short of crit capping, and therefore you must use precision food, such as bowls of curry butternut squash soup. This, unfortunately, there is no, as far as I know, there's no ascended version of this food, so you do give up on the benefits of ascended food. My advice to you, if you're in that situation and you're in a strike group or a raid group, to ask the commander to put you with the druid so that you can avail yourself of the superior food in the ascended form. If that is not an option and it's not possible, you will want to use precision. As big of a downgrade as that is from ascended, it's what you got to do. Hopefully you can make yourself a squad with a druid. But yeah, that's it for gear. Let's get into traits right now. So for the Bladesworn traits and specializations, we're going to take Strength, Discipline, and Bladesworn. In Strength and Discipline, these are going to look very familiar. These are the same traits that you use with basically any other power DPS or power banner warrior build. In Strength, we're going to take Peak Performance, Great Fortitude, and Berserker's Power. Peak Performance, again, and I whenever I don't mention this in a guide, people always ask, and the answer is you always get a 5% damage buff unconditional with Peak Performance, whether or not you have a physical skill or not. The extra 10% is only when you have a physical skill. In this build, it doesn't make any sense to use a physical skill. Signet of Might will work out to be far better for us. So again, you're only getting 5% from this, but it's perfectly fine. That's a great buff. Great Fortitude is extra good. We are getting a lot of extra stats from Great Fortitude, and we like that a lot. So yes, definitely go for it. You might be tempted to run Forceful Greatsword, but you do not need it. Great Fortitude is a far higher DPS boost, so that's what we're going with. And then Berserker's Power, as you all know, is just OP, and 21% damage boost is pretty much perma available in this build once we get our first burst off, and nothing really to say there. These traits have been in the game for years and years and years, and you know how they work. Discipline, same thing, Warrior Sprint, double standards, of course, double standards, quite good. And then Axe Mastery, which is a crucial trait. Not only does it boost our DPS and make our axe skills have reduced cooldown, it also gives us bonus flow, which is very good for our rotation. Flow, as you might wonder, since it's our first time bringing it up, flow is the equivalent of adrenaline. It allows us to do our burst skill, and it works slightly differently from adrenaline, as we'll discuss in the gameplay part. But the main thing to remember is we want a lot of flow to use our skills, and Axe Mastery is how we get it. Now let's go into Bladesworn, and I'm going to do a little bit more in depth on each trait because it's probably your first time seeing. Essentially, the first Adept trait is always going to be just allowing us to use the specialization weapon, and gives us, in this case, access to the Gun Saber, which is an alternate skill bar that has all different skills and lets us essentially have a weapon swap, because otherwise Bladesworn does not have a weapon swap. And the skills are somewhat useful, as we'll discuss in a bit. The Adept trait we're going to take is Unseen Sword. So when you swap weapons, it's going to essentially, in an AoE around you, do some AoE damage. This isn't a huge amount of damage that it's adding, but it is pretty good. It helps a lot in terms of upping our overall DPS, but what it really does is it gives us 5 seconds of extra flow, of faster adrenaline increase, and we really want that when we switch to our Gun Saber to our burst skill, and we need that flow rate. So Unseen Sword is sort of a very important trait for us. Dragon Scale Defense, gain boons when entering Dragon Trigger. Dragon Trigger is when you're channeling your burst skill and charging it up, essentially. So the stability is quite good. The stability, when you are channeling Dragon Trigger, you can't move and you're very vulnerable. So having stability, even if it's just one stack, can be a game changer. It can be the difference between getting off your Dragon Slash or not. And so yeah, it's a very useful trait. The next one is one of the keys of the build, and it's Fierce as Fire. You gain increased strike damage for each round of ammunition spent. So when you spend an ammo skill, such as on your pistol or your Axe 3 or your gun saber skills 2 through 5, those are all ammo skills. You get a stack of Fierce as Fire, which is a 1% outgoing damage stack, and you can stack up to 10 of them. The build will try and rotation will try its best to keep as many Fierce as Fire stacks up as possible, especially when we do our burst skill, because you want to really maximize the amount of damage you're getting out of that. So using your ammo skills is very important, and it's one of the reasons why we do use pistol offhand in this build instead of axe offhand, and why axe main hand is so much better than other main hands, because it's one of the few main hands for warrior, or the only main hand for warrior, that has. For our next trait, we have Guns and Glory. Gain ferocity for a short time when you hit with an explosion. This effect stacks in duration. So you can get up to 10 seconds of this buff. When you hit with an explosion, you get a fat amount of ferocity back. Luckily, we have an explosion on our pistol 5, as well as explosions on skills 2 and 3 of our gun saber. Those also count as an explosion. And as you'll see, we will be doing our best to keep our Guns and Glory buff up as much as possible. And then our Grandmaster trait, there really isn't a great Grandmaster trait. There's no Grandmaster trait that's like gain a bazillion damage. The first two are good options. Immortal Dragon, you heal yourself when you do a burst skill, and you gain a little bit, you gain protection. I mean, that's okay, but in a raid or a strike mission, you should have a healer healing you. You shouldn't need to self-heal. So, Unyielding Dragon makes your Dragon Slash become unblockable. The unblockable part isn't a huge deal in PvE, because for the most part, no raid boss blocks, as far as I'm aware. But the next part is the important part. Ignores blindness. There are times where you will be blind, and when we're talking about one attack that hits for 170,000 and you have to invest a ton of time into it, you don't want to miss because you got randomly blinded. So being immune to blind, very strong. And then the last one is stuns foes on hit. You can one tap break bars with a full bar. You'll have very high amounts of CC. Thing that you want to remember is on bosses like Samurag or Slothosaur, they are invulnerable, and you are wasting a lot of resources to use your Dragon Slash. So yes, you can break their break bar, but at what cost? The cost is that your DPS is going to go through the floor, which is why, again, and I'm stressing this for a reason, on bosses like that where they're invulnerable during their break bar, you don't want to count on Unyielding Dragon to break their break bar. You want to just play Berserker. Simply put, play Berserker on bosses like that. However, bosses where you can still do damage to them while they have their break bar up, such as Gorseval, for an example, or perhaps Bone Skinner, or any bosses essentially where you can still do damage to them while they have their break bar up, you will one tap their break bar pretty strongly with this when you use your Dragon Slash. Pretty great trait for that. Again, your Grandmaster trait, it's not adding a ton of damage. In fact, I would say the best part about this trait, for the most part, is the ignoring blindness. A bit underwhelming, but what can you do? So yeah, now that we've talked about traits, let's talk about our skills. Our utility skills should be very familiar. Signet of Might and 2 banners. You guys have seen these skills before. You're used to them. They are nothing new. Our elite is going to be Signet of Rage. Why Signet of Rage? For the passive, gains adrenaline. Essentially, you gain a little bit of flow every second with Signet of Rage, and that's very helpful. So we will definitely take that. However, that said, it is not a ton of flow, and the build can function without Signet of Rage. So if you are in a situation where it's vitally important, like if you're doing progression rating or progression strikes, and your team is just learning the fights, you might want to just bring Battle Standard to get that nice res. And a key clutch Battle Standard can help people out a bit. And then our heal skill is going to be To the Limit. To the Limit will get you a nice bit of flow generation early in the fight. So you're going to probably start most raid fights or most strike bosses by using your To the Limit just to get yourself that bit of bonus flow. That said, you don't need the flow, and in reality, you could use any heal skill that you find of benefit. Healing Signet will be perfectly fine. Defiant Stance might come in handy in some places. And you could even experiment with Combat Stimulant if you want. If Combat Stimulant didn't have a cast time, I would recommend it unequivocally, because it is an ammo skill and it will give you more fiercest fire stacks. However, it does have a cast and an animation, so it's not the type of thing that's going to benefit you to use in combat unless you needed to. So now that we've discussed our utility skills, let's talk about the pistol. The pistol is a very unique weapon, and I want to go over that. So essentially what it does is whenever you use your pistol 5, it shoots all of its stacks of ammo at once. So if it has 6 stacks of ammo, it shoots 6 times. So roughly speaking, when you're fully buffed in a raid, it will hit for between 40 and 50,000 damage with full stacks. That is a very hard-hitting skill. There aren't many skills in Guild Wars 2 that hit for 40,000 damage in a single hit, and it's quite powerful. And it gives us, if you use all 6 shots, it gives us 6 stacks of Fiercest Fire, which definitely helps keep that buff up and maxed out. Pistol 4, it comes at a drawback, I should say, before we move on. It knocks you back a few units. So you do have to be aware that it can put you in a bad position to use it. Pistol 4, however, makes you gap close to your target, so it can sort of make up for the gap that Pistol 5 opens up. Additionally, it restores 3 shots to your Pistol 5. So as you'll see when we go over the rotation, it allows you to always have a lot of stacks on your Pistol 5 when you use it. So you're never using a very anemic Pistol 5 with only 1 or 2 stacks. It really helps there. Otherwise, it's not particularly strong skill. One thing that you do want to remember is it does give you an Aegis. So there are several times in a raid or a strike mission where having a clutch Aegis can save you if you're not getting it from your supports. And being aware of what your skills do is very important in Guild Wars 2, rather than just mindlessly following a rotation. If you are in a situation where an Aegis will save your life, use your Pistol 4 to save your life. Don't supports do it. Yeah, so that's it for the pistol. Let's talk about the gun saber. So the gun saber, the auto attack, we don't use it in the build. The auto attack is worse than your axe auto. Not only is the damage worse than your axe auto, but axe auto benefits from axe mastery to give us bonus flow. So we never want to use an auto attack on our gun saber. It's not very helpful. Our best skill in gun saber is Blooming Fire. Blooming Fire does a lot of explosion damage and hits really hard. It hits for around 15 to 20,000 damage in raids, so that is a hard-hitting skill indeed. Skill number 3 is Artillery Slash, which also counts as an explosion and also hits very hard, although not quite as hard as Blooming Fire. So these are our two most important skills, skills 2 and 3. You'll see when we go into the rotation that we use whichever, we prioritize Blooming Fire, but if Blooming Fire is on cooldown or out of ammo, we will use Artillery Slash in its place. And then if we get into very desperate straits where both of them are on cooldown, we can use Cyclone Trigger. Cyclone Trigger does hit pretty hard, and it has utility in blocking missiles, but one thing you have to keep in mind is it's not an explosion, so it doesn't help us keep our Guns and Glory buff up, so we don't want to prioritize it in our rotation. Lastly, Break Step is a gap closer and can be used as a gap closer, which is very helpful, and it's an explosion, which is also helpful. It doesn't hit very hard, so it's not a part of our active DPS rotation. However, be aware, again, what your skills do. This is a movement skill that will help you close the gap on your enemy if you have to do so. And therefore, you should remember that you have this skill on your bar and available to you. Then lastly, we have Dragon Trigger. Dragon Trigger is our burst skill. Essentially, how the burst skill works is you have this bar here, your flow, and you have a bar on top of it that look like little bullets. Those are your charges. When you start channeling your Dragon Trigger, your F2, your flow will start decreasing, but your charges will start increasing. Essentially, you're converting your flow to charges. When you do so, skills 1, 2, and 3 will change to your different types of Dragon Slashes. Skill number 1 in your Dragon Trigger is going to be your big slicing super high damage skill that we will be using as part of our DPS rotation. Skill number 2 is a rush, where you do a massive forward rush at your opponent and through your opponent potentially, and hitting everything on the way. It doesn't do as much damage as skill number 1, but it does do a lot of damage in a straight line. And so it could be the sort of thing in like, say, open world PvE you want to be aware of, but in raids it's typically not something you're going to want to do at all. And then your skill number 3 is sort of a ranged skill. It does the least damage of all the 3 different Dragon Slashes, but it's ranged, so and hits everything in a straight line. So it's got some utility in situations where you can't be in melee for whatever reason, but you still want to hit the boss. And remember, CC with it. So if you're in a situation where the boss is in the middle of some damaging AoE field and you need to break its break bar, remember that you can do that with your 3rd Dragon Slash skill from range. And again, know what your skills do. Yes, the rotation says always use skill 1 in Dragon Slash, but remember your other skills have utility built into them. Sometimes utility can get you out of a sticky situation, and that's where you want to be. So anyway, guys, now I'm going to get into the rotation for the build. The rotation, again, this is as I'm recording this, we're on day 3 of the expansion. The rotation will continue to be refined, and I'm sure that the super min-maxers on the Snowcrow's Discord and various other tryhard Discords will continue to refine and refine and refine and improve and improve and improve until they have a very tight, very good DPS rotation that hits big numbers. The rotation I'm going to show you is relatively straightforward, relatively easy to play, and relatively easy to learn. Again, it's not perfect. I'm not going to claim it's perfect. It will definitely be improved upon as time goes on, and may not even be the ideal thing now. But again, it's day 3 as I record this of the X Pack, so everything is a theory craft work in progress. So I want you guys to remember that. But that said, you can benchmark around 35,000 DPS with this rotation. So the rotation that I'm going to be sharing with you is not a bad rotation by any means. 35,000 on a banner warrior is actually quite good. So this will be very helpful to you guys, I think, and I do want you to watch it. First, I'm going to play it in slow motion and describe the skills that I'm using. And once slow motion is over, then we will do a fast motion version of it at normal speed so you can see it in action. Stick around, guys. All right, we start by using To the Limit, and then Gun Saber number 3. Swap to our pistol, use pistol 5, then pistol 4, axe 3, axe 2, and then an auto attack chain. After the auto attack chain, we will begin to channel our dragon trigger. As you can see, we're channeling our dragon trigger. We are going to use skill 4 and 5 to give us more stacks, and then when it's charged, use skill number 1. Big hit, and then we use our dragon gunblade number 2, back to our pistol axe 3, axe 2, pistol 5, and then an auto attack chain. After the auto attack chain, we're going to go back into channeling our dragon trigger, use number 4 and number 5, and then when the dragon trigger is charged, we slash, and then use Gun Saber skill number 2 again, and then we're going to go back to our axe pistol, use 3, use 2, 4, and then 5 to get that big hit from the pistol number 5, and then an auto attack chain to queue up our next slash. And there's the slash. Skill number 3 on the gunblade. Back to our set. Axe 3, axe 2, and then an auto attack chain. And we will go, I believe we'll do an axe 3 here. Yeah, axe 3, and then back into our dragon trigger. And our pistol skills should be up, so we're going to use gunblade number 3. And then when we go out, we use axe 3, axe 2, axe 4, or pistol 4, and then pistol 5 for the big pistol hit. And then an auto attack chain will get us to our next slash. And you can start of sort to see the loop here. There's going to be times when you don't have the ability to have max stacks on your pistol, so you don't want to necessarily use a 2 or 3 stack pistol shot. And on those loops through the rotation, you're just going to use axe 3, axe 2, and an auto attack chain to get you back into your dragon slash. However, there's going to be other times where you do have pistol stacks. So after your axe 3 and axe 2, you will use pistol 4 and pistol 5, and then the auto attack chain. So really, the loop back into your main weapon skills are always the same. When you come out of Dragon Slash, you're always going to use skill 3 and skill 2 on your axe. Now, whether or not you use your pistol skills will depend on whether they're on cooldown and how many stacks you have on your pistol 5. If you don't have stacks on your pistol 5 or it's on cooldown, you're just going to do an auto attack chain on axe and go back into Dragon Slash. If they are off cooldown, you will be able to use pistol 4, then pistol 5 to get big damage in. Now, once the boss is below 50%, Axe 3 becomes a very good skill. And Axe 3, you're going to want to loop in a little bit more if possible. So you'll have situations where instead of going Axe 3, Axe 2 auto attack chain, you might go Axe 3, Axe 2 auto attack chain, and then another Axe 3. The extra Axe 3 under 50% does add a little bit of damage, and it's something worth prioritizing when it's convenient and doesn't delay your dragon trigger. One thing you want to avoid that I'll mention here is as you're doing your Dragon Slash, the big burst skill, unfortunately, unlike other warrior burst skills, other skills don't on your Gunblade don't queue with it. So what can happen is in your urgency to get your next skill in your rotation ready, say your Gunblade 2 or Gunblade 3, what's going to end up happening is you'll interrupt your Dragon Slash, which is absolutely catastrophic for your damage. So I'm playing on EU as I record this, so I have high ping. I'm perhaps being a little conservative with the amount of time I'm giving myself to use my Dragon Slash before I press my next skill. And the reason for that is I really, really, really don't want to interrupt the Dragon Slash because that would kill the entire rotation. So as we get to the end here, you can see a good idea of how the rotation works. Hopefully this looking at it in slow-mo and me giving you this voiceover has helped a little bit for everybody to sort of get a feeling of exactly how the rotation works. And again, I do want to mention that the rotation is going to be improved upon by the community. It's going to be refined, and I'm sure there's going to be in the coming days and weeks much more efficient, much better rotations. But again, this one already will give you really good DPS compared to Berserker on situations where you can use it, and don't feel like learning this is a waste of your time at all, because it definitely isn't. And most likely, the optimal rotation will just be a better executed version of this. So anyway, guys, now let's watch it in real-time speed. All right, guys, that is it for me. I hope you enjoyed this build guide. I am so excited that End of Dragons is here and we get to finally play all the new specs. And I hope you Warrior fans watching this video enjoy playing your Bladesworn and mastering the new rotation and learning the new skills, and just really having a blast and having as much fun as I am. As always, I thank you guys for your continued support. If you do have any questions, comments, or what, please leave them in the comments below, and I will do my best to answer every question that gets put down there. Again, guys, thank you for your support. Thanks for watching the video, and I appreciate it very much. And basically it. Enjoy it so much, and I look forward to seeing all of you guys playing Bladesworn out there. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.